I'm Tacey Crescent. I am an Endicott alum. Now I graduated in 2020 and I work for the United States Senate as the Chris Coons' digital media manager. So I work with him in his Delaware office. I travel with him to DC often. My main duties are being his photographer and speechwriter. So I kind of shadow him everywhere he goes. My photography at work is very different than my photography in my personal life. At work, I am always like, I follow Chris. I photograph everything that he does, whether it's in our office, behind the scenes, behind closed doors, or it's when he's out doing public events. I followed him and Biden on the campaign trail this past year in 2020. That was really fun because you get a lot of engagement. You see a lot of people. You get good photographs, right? Like, especially in a pandemic, it's hard to get good photographs of people together. So that was awesome. That was fun. But for work, it's really photographing things for politics and politicians. However, in my personal life, I really like to do nature photography, landscape photography, being outdoors, or people. Like, photographing people is like so much fun and so intricate. So I try to do that as much as possible.
My name is Max Oblicki. I'm a photographer and kind of marketing person. I went to school at UNE in Biddeford, Maine. I actually started off as an exercise science major and ended up doing psychology instead and was running my photography on the side. So my photography kind of started out as a hobby back in high school. I had some friends who were interested in it and I knew nothing about it. So I picked up a camera and pretty much just started taking pictures of everything that I was doing. So I was going around driving places. I had my first car at that point, so I was just taking pictures of, like, you know, I drove here, I saw this cool thing, so I took pictures of that. Drove a dirt road, that was cool, took a picture of that, and it got to the point where my photos are really growing and really progressing, and I had some magazines reaching out to me, and at that point I was like, oh, like, you know, I have something here, I can work with this. I started out very much just kind of documenting the trips I was taking in my car for fun, and then that kind of turned into doing some like journalism work, so I was like taking pictures and writing for magazines about these trips. And then from there, I started getting clients who were more interested in like doing commercial work. So I shot for a couple companies that did like clothing. And then from there, I had people interested in like doing Airbnb exchanges. So I would start traveling to cabins and photographing them. And then more recently, in the past couple of years, I've gotten into film photography and like surf photography. And I'm also starting to lean back more into like doing some more commercial work and documenting my trips and doing the photojournalism work. So it's all kind of rolled into this big snowball of like all this different photography work that I like to do. But I like to keep it diverse, and I think that's important. I'll shoot digital mainly for projects, and what I do is I bring a film camera with some rolls with me, and I shoot the film just for fun, like when it's with me, and like that might be some stuff that I would post on my Instagram that's not like sponsored content, just like regular stuff you'd want to post, like good moments. And if there's anything that's really good, I just offer it to the client, like, thanks for having me, here's some extra stuff I shot. And I think that's a cool thing. I think people really enjoy getting that little bit of film photography. Just like a little extra thing, like, hey, I shot this while I was there on top of what I did for you that was organized and set up. Here's just some, you know, cool stuff.
My dad was a photojournalist. He started when he was young, like in the Vietnam War, like super young. And he actually shot alongside Eddie Adams. And if you know anything about photography, you know that one of the most famous film photos of all time is the Saigon execution from the Vietnam War. I remember studying it one day and then going back home and being like, oh my gosh, learned about this cool photograph today. And it was all about like censorship, and my family was like, dude, your dad was literally standing right next to the guy that took that photo. I was like, oh, that's crazy. I grew up him being a journalist in like all the local newspapers in our state in Delaware. He always had a camera around his neck. Like, he literally, I don't have a memory without him having a camera. That's kind of how I started with photography, just seeing him and mirroring him and knowing that it was like something that's so personal in his life, and going back to a a photo that he had gone and developed, and it like brings back memories. It's essentially how I got into shooting film. I saw my dad do it. I saw how many photos he took, film in particular, because he always shot film.
For me, and I think a lot of people today, it was other people doing it. I think everybody has a friend who's a film photographer, and you see their work, and you're like, oh, that's such a good shot. Like, how'd you get that? And they're like, oh, it's film. Like, it's just the way it is. So I had bought some film cameras over the years just from like antique shops that I had hanging around that I didn't know how to use, and ended up getting one fixed. It was like super cheap, local guy fixed it, and ran a roll through, and it sucked. Nothing came out. So I'm like, oh, that sucked. I got discouraged for like 6 months, bought another roll and tried it, and we did a fun trip. We hiked up to a fire tower in New Hampshire, and the goal was to make coffee. And I brought a stove and cups, water, everything, kettle, coffee grinder, like hand grinder. Got up to the top of the mountain. I didn't bring any coffee. Like, oh, that sucks, but at least I'm getting some great pictures. So I'm taking all these pictures, and I finish my roll, and I go to unwind it, and I don't hear anything. And the film hadn't caught. So I didn't shoot a single photo. So I was like, oh my God. I'm like for me, I was like, oh, film sucks. Like, I hate doing film. I don't know why people love this. And then I got my first roll back a couple weeks later. I was hooked. Like, I get it. It's super fun.
When he switched to a DSLR, he was almost more frustrated with the DSLR. It's so much more easy to operate a DSLR once you get the hang of it, because it's instant gratification of having a photo, not going through the motions of knowing exactly what setting you're on, or going to get your film developed. But he was almost more frustrated with it, which is hilarious. But I've come to notice that film photographers in general, once you start to shoot film, it's like muscle memory, and it's like you like how hands-on it is. You like how you have to know every setting. When I first started learning how to shoot film, it is so difficult. It is so difficult because our generation, we're not used to tintypes or Polaroids. Like, we're used to the instant gratification of clicking a button and seeing your photo. And I knew that the whole like patience thing was gonna have to come with the learning how to shoot film. I remember getting my first negatives back, and it literally felt magical. It felt so magical. You don't get that with digital. You don't get the like essence of the natural world reflected through a photo. And I take that, all I do is look at digital photos all day. And I've never once touched up a film photo, but I touch up every single one of my digital photos. So that in and of itself says a lot about film.
It's actually being present with your photo more so than, like, the waiting's fun, but compared to digital, like when I'm shooting a project, it's just click, 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 like 5 or 6 pictures instantly, and I can pick the best one out of that, and that's that. Film is you're taking that time to really make sure your settings are right, your focus is on, and you're not missing that moment. You're really there. So I think, a lot of people are living through their phones or living through their camera lenses right now. So film is like that perfect medium where, yeah, you're looking through a viewfinder, but you have to be there with it and notice everything before you press that button.
A lot of the photographers that I've met recently, a lot of the seasoned photographers, photojournalists, they have never stopped shooting film. They've just added the digital part. They've added their digital camera. And they're so good at it, right? Because I think it's because of the muscle memory. And from the conversations that I've had, it's photography tells a story, or it should tell a story, right? Like, you're literally capturing and freezing a moment in time. You want to be, as a photographer, you want to be connected to that. And I feel like the digital camera kind of inherently disconnects your connection with whatever photo, whatever moment you're in. When I have my film camera in my hand, I know that I only have a certain number of shots that I can take. I can't just take an infinite amount. I can't hold my finger down on the button and get 30 photos. I feel really connected with the photo that I take, and then that thus makes a better photo.
Every now and then you get that letdown, like you think you got that awesome shot and you get it back, and the focus is off, or like there's something in the frame that you didn't see beforehand. And like with digital, that's a quick, you want to just edit that out. And with film, you almost feel like there's a certain like an air around it, like, oh, that's in the frame, but like I can't edit that out. Like, that's the way it was. I gotta leave it. So, and I think having that like presence in the moment and respect for what was there, even if it's not the perfect moment, is what's great about film.
Legitimately, film has the power to make you jump back in time. and it is almost like this dreamy, romantic feeling to it. Whether it's your photo, whether it's a photo that you found in a shoebox, whatever it is. And then like the writing on the back, like I think every photo that I've ever picked up, I look on the back to see if somebody had dated it. We don't get that anymore. And like that, the hands-on, like actual tangible photo is something that I hope selfishly comes back. I'm home in Massachusetts right now for this week, and I was looking through the hundreds of thousands of photos that we have like collected in our basement. There's this one photo of my mom and then me as like an infant child on a beach sunset, which is actually the beach that I like live at now in Delaware. And I hadn't, like, mind you, I hadn't gone back to Delaware in like over a decade since I moved, so that in and of itself is like nostalgic. And then there was like this very warm tint to the photo, and then you had these like blue and pink hues in the background from the sunset, and then my mom's like hair swaying in the wind. I was an infant, like I don't remember that moment. I would never remember that moment. I have no recollection of it, but I literally felt how powerful and how beautiful it was, and I like literally holding it. It was incredible.
I hope to see, people creating new film stocks and trying out new things with film, because it's just, like I said, I think it's almost a remedy to what was going on Instagram beforehand, was just a lot of like mindless, like, okay, let's hike to the spot and shoot the banger photo and get down, like nobody sits with it. It's just, we got to get here, take this picture, get these amount of likes and go, with no regard for what they're actually looking at or what they're doing. So I think film is going to put people back in that moment a little bit, recognize what they're shooting, and maybe ultimately like generate better content in general.
One of the interesting aspects of film's resurgence, I feel like, is the way it's separate but also part of our digital worlds. Like, I feel like social media is now mimicking this analog tech. I'm not entirely sure if the whole film resurgence is like a trendy thing to do, or we're really kind of acknowledging the storytelling aspect behind photography. I was always super interested in looking at other people's photos online. I was definitely inspired by other people's photographs, and I wanted to totally mirror that and be like all these awesome photographers, because I wanted to be like, I wanted to take those cool photos, and I wanted to like jump back in time and say like, hey, look, I can shoot film. But then once I really did start shooting film, I like never post my film. I don't think I ever really have posted my film. I have so much film, and I've developed hundreds of photos, but I don't do anything with it other than keep it for myself and then go back and I'm like, wow, I live those moments.
So I didn't really come into too much contact with film work on social media until I got involved with the surf scene here in Maine. And there's a lot of people who double up as like film photographers and surf gurus here in Maine. So all of these guys had great shots from like, Nikonos like cameras like out shooting in the water, and then some guys shooting from the shore. And it was all amazing, like super cool work. So I ended up reaching out to a few of them, talking film. I had one friend who shoots weddings on film, who showed me he has an awesome Hasselblad camera, like a super vintage one. Like, I was just getting blown away by all this awesome stuff, so I started to kind of pick it up and try it out.
If you're a good photographer, you're being very mindful about the frame, being very mindful about the exact moment. I shoot for a specific image, and I'm very mindful about what that image is going to be. Everywhere I go now, I always bring at least 2 DSLRs and a film. And I only bring film because whether I ever use it for work, I know I want it for my own like collection, and also if my boss Chris Coons or his family wants it when he retires, we have that tangible photo. So I always bring at least 2 DSLRs and my film. And I was in a meeting a couple weeks ago with Joe Biden, Chris, Kamala, and random other people, and I had literally, it was in the White House, it was in the Oval Office, and I had literally one photo that I was allowed to take. Like, they put massive constraints on photographers, even if you have clearance. And I had the choice to choose between my DSLRs or my film. I would have usually never ever chosen film, but I chose my film camera for this moment. And I had the entire meeting to take it. At any point, I could only take one though. And by the end of the hour, I was like, okay, well, I haven't taken the photo yet. I hope something notable happens. Hoping. And Joe got up out of his seat and he gave this presidential challenge coin, is what it's called. He gave this challenge coin in honor of his late son, who had passed away a couple years ago from cancer. He gave it to Chris. And there was this like really beautiful exchange that they had in that moment. And that's when I whipped out my film camera and took a photo of that exact moment. And now I have that forever. Like, that is so insane to me. And I chose film because I wanted to not only capture like that moment, that exchange between the two of them, but I wanted it to feel special. Like, when you look back at the photo, I wanted you, whoever looks at it, me, whoever holds it, whoever it is, I wanted that feeling to be expressed through the photo.